In 1995, a man rubbed lemon juice all over his face. He walked straight into two banks with a loaded gun. He smiled directly into the security cameras. He was completely unmasked. He believed lemon juice made him invisible to cameras. When police arrested him, he was genuinely shocked. He mumbled a sentence that stunned the officers, "But I wore the juice." He was not insane. He was not under the influence of drugs. He was simply blind to his own incompetence. We laugh at his bizarre story, but his broken logic lives inside every single one of us. Have you ever argued with someone who was completely wrong? No matter how much proof you show them, they refuse to yield. They smile with complete confidence. They treat your evidence like noise. Why are the least skilled people always the most confident? The answer began with two psychologists at Cornell University. In 1999, David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a landmark paper. They tested undergraduate students on logic, grammar, and humor. After the tests, they asked each student a simple question: how well do you think you performed compared to your peers? The results were startling. Students who scored in the lowest 12% were convinced they excelled. They believed their performance ranked in the 68th percentile. They didn't just misjudge their score slightly, they thought they were far above average. Meanwhile, the top scorers underestimated their relative performance. The highest achievers assumed everyone else found the test easy too. This phenomenon became known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. But what actually causes this cognitive blind spot? To be good at a skill requires specific knowledge. You need rules, patterns, and critical judgment. But here is the cruel psychological trap. The exact knowledge needed to perform a task is needed to evaluate it. If you lack skill in grammar, you cannot recognize bad grammar. If you lack skill in chess, you cannot see a disastrous move. Incompetence suffers from a double burden. First, you make poor choices. Second, you lack the capability to realize your mistakes. Psychologists call this ability metacognition. Metacognition is the ability to monitor your own thinking. It is the inner mirror of the human mind. Without metacognition, you are trapped in an illusion. You perform poorly, but your brain registers total success. How often do you evaluate your own thinking process? Consider modern driving skills. Studies show 80% of drivers rate themselves as above average. Mathematically, that statement is completely impossible. Thousands of unsafe drivers drift across highways every single day. They cut off traffic with absolute certainty in their skills. They blame every near miss on other people. Their brain actively shields them from their own flaws. Look at political debate across the internet. People read one headline and feel like seasoned experts. They lecture doctors on virus transmission. They explain economic policy to financial professors. A tiny amount of knowledge creates a massive surge of confidence. Visualized on a graph, this phenomenon forms a striking curve. On the vertical axis, we plot personal confidence. On the horizontal axis, we plot actual expertise. When you learn a tiny fraction about a subject, confidence rockets skyward. Researchers informally call this peak Mount Stupid. On Mount Stupid, you know just enough to feel invincible. You don't know enough to realize how deep the subject goes. You feel like a genius standing on a tiny hill. But what happens when you keep studying? What happens when you read deeper into the subject? You cross a frightening threshold. You suddenly discover thousands of variables you never knew existed. Confidence collapses into a steep, terrifying drop. You fall straight into the valley of despair. In the valley of despair, you feel utterly incompetent. You realize how vast the discipline truly is. Real experts spend years trapped inside this valley. They second-guess every decision they make. They hesitate where fools charge forward blindly. This is why true professionals often suffer from imposter syndrome. They know enough to see their own limitation clearly. The fool sees nothing, so he fears nothing. If you push past the valley of despair, recovery slowly begins. You begin the long climb up the slope of enlightenment. Knowledge grows steadily over time. Confidence returns slowly, grounded in hard experience. But notice something remarkable about the graph. The peak of master confidence rarely reaches the height of Mount Stupid. A true master never feels as confident as an ignorant beginner. Why did evolution allow such a dangerous flaw to survive? Wouldn't blind confidence get our early ancestors killed? Imagine a group of early humans facing a dark cave. A cautious, self-aware human calculates every hidden threat. They freeze in hesitation. An overconfident human steps forward without fear. In ancient environments, decisive action often beat cautious hesitation. Overconfidence projected strength to rival tribes. It helped leaders rally followers during desperate crises. Our ancestors survived because belief often triggered action. But in a complex modern society, this trait turns toxic. It places loud incompetence into positions of enormous power. It blinds us to our personal weaknesses. Is there a way to escape this biological trap? The ancient philosopher Socrates offered the first warning. He famously stated that he was the wisest man in Athens, not because he knew everything, but because he knew that he knew nothing. Recognizing your own ignorance is the birth of wisdom. To fight the Dunning-Kruger effect, you must seek active friction. Never ask yourself if you are right. Ask what evidence would prove you wrong. Invite harsh criticism from people smarter than you. Treat your opinions like temporary hypotheses, not gospel truths. When you feel absolute certainty on a topic, pause immediately. Absolute certainty is not a sign of expertise. Absolute certainty is a biological signal that you are standing on Mount Stupid. The brain prefers comfort over accuracy every single time. It builds cozy illusions to shield your fragile ego. It tells you that you are brilliant, talented, and unmatched. It flatters you while making you foolish. Look closely at your strongest beliefs today. The things you claim to understand completely. The subjects you dismiss without a second thought. Could you explain them to a child right now? Could you write down the underlying mechanics without searching Google? Most of us cannot. We borrow headlines and pretend they are personal wisdom. We wear intellectual juice on our faces, and we walk blindly into the bank. We think we are invisible to our own mistakes, but the camera is always recording. Every time you mock someone for being foolish, remember this. You are someone else's incompetent person right now. In some field, in some topic, in some conversation. You're standing on a tiny hill, smiling at the sky, completely unaware of the ocean of knowledge beneath you. The most dangerous room is filled with people who feel absolute certainty. Certainty closes the mind. Doubt opens the door to discovery. Next time you feel completely right, stop and breathe. Look down at your feet. Check if you are covered in lemon juice. Because the moment you think you are a genius is the exact moment your brain has tricked you again. True intelligence is not knowing all the answers. True intelligence is the courage to question your own mind. We spend our lives running from ignorance. Yet ignorance is the only starting line for real growth. You're not as smart as you think, and that is your strength.